Yeah, hello everybody. Um, we have talked last time about the different aims within an economy, and then in the end, after we have talked about this magic square, steady and appropriate economic growth, price level stability, high level employment, and external balance, that we can go for some further goals, which we also find in the law in Germany, but which you of course also find in general, that from a political perspective, you would have some kind of an aim that you have a balanced income distribution, so to speak. This is your system of transfers and taxes, that you regulate somehow the income in your society. And then, of course, due to climate change, almost all developed countries have also an economic aim with respect to ecological conditions. And yeah, how important this is, this we will also see in the United States this night when they are voting for the president. This will be, yeah, very interesting, the outcome for the United States and of course also for the world. And then what is special for Germany, but also in general, if you look for to the European Union, is the question about a balanced financial budget. Right now, we have the meeting of the government of Germany, and we will see if we still have the same government in the end of the week. And yeah, the main thing is a controversy with respect to the question how to finance public spending. And in the end, if you take all this, yeah, more or less descriptive, or the description of the economy together, then I think you also should be able maybe to do a forecast, but in that you can read about forecasts and that where the economy is going, and that you know what this is about. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you is, especially in European countries, we have, yeah, the situation that we are becoming older and older and older, and what this means for the economy. And there I talked also about you, the future generation, that you should think of what does it mean for you that we are becoming older and older. And within a democracy, you want to get in, you want to win the polls, and therefore you need in general 50% plus one votes. And if you look at the demographic situation, then you have to admit that also the society is split into two groups. When you think of the so-called median voter, this is the guy who sits in the middle, and this is then the guy where the main parties are looking. Because if you make a policy for the people who are older than these median voter, then you can think that you will get roughly these 50%. And the age of this voter is right now roughly 52 years. So you should not be surprised if a policy is made which looks at people around this age and also at the people who are older. And therefore, of course, when we have the next vote, you should think about it that you should go to the voting and also that you, yeah, maybe also have to go over proportional to the polls because in the older range in the future we become the old people relatively more. And what does this mean in general is for the economy is that this will have an impact especially on the labor market. And what we see in a very long perspective is that this process of becoming older does not really stop. In history, we always thought maybe this ends, but if we take the expected lifetime in a very long perspective, starting from 1870 until now, then we will see that it is almost a linear dependence. What we have here is that we look at the life expectancy of always the country in the world with the highest life expectancy. And this was in general mostly Sweden or Japan. And there you see over the last 150 years, we see that we are starting from roughly 40 years, and right now it is a little bit more than 80 years. And that here, more or less, every year is added somehow 3 to 4 months per year. And well, we will see if we will have some plateau in the end. But right now, if we look at the data, there is no end. And if we then look what this means when we are look at our retirement age, and this is roughly 65 years, and we are not having enough children because I think I put it just here. Where was it? Here, number of children, that this is below this number of 2, and 2 children per person we need to have the population stable. Then this means that people, the number of the people who can work will for Germany start to decrease in the next years. And if we then especially look, starting from right now, how much people will retire, and these are the gray numbers here. So people who were born 1955, 1956, 1957, and so on. They will retire this year, next year, in 2026, and so on. And how much people, young people, come into the labor market, then we see that in the next years, roughly 100,000 to 300,000 people are missing in the labor market. Well, and if you then look at our pension system, and this is also a controversy in our government right now, that the level of pensions, that this is going down during the last years. And right now the government want to stop it roughly at 48% of your last earnings. But what does it mean if you do not have the people anymore to work? This would mean that you have to increase the payment of the working people. And right now we are at roughly 20%, and so this will increase. So this is the payment of working people for the pensions. And so from this demographics, from the demographic development, we have the problem that in the future there will be less people who are working and an increase of public spending for pensions. Well, and this is, yeah, the task for you in the future, how we will deal with this fact, which is there, and this will be very interesting how we will deal with this in the next 10 to 20 years. This will be one of the main economic tasks in especially the developed countries, because in the developed countries you more or less have the same demographic development as we have it here in Germany. Yeah, and especially this has also an impact on our care system in Germany, and this is the number. of people who need care. And there you see we have already roughly 5 million. And this will also, due to the aging of the society, will become more and more and more. And therefore also the spending for the care system will increase. And I don't know, and I don't think that we will really end here at 4%. And if you take these together for the pension system, we are here at 20%, and for the care system, another 4 or 5%. And this means just for this public spending, you will have to spend more or less every fourth of your euro you are earning. So this means roughly one fourth of the earnings has to be spent for pensions and care in the future. So therefore I recommend that you as the young generation really keep an eye on these developments so that you are not surprised in the future. Okay, with this I want to end in general my overview on the aims in the economy. And if you remember the labor market and the different types of unemployment, then we had there the type of cyclical unemployment, and this I explained to you was due to what we see in the development of an economy, what we call the business cycle. That we find in historical data that an economy is generally developing around a long-term trend. Remember, this is more or less hopefully our aim, which we achieve of 1 to 3% of long-term economic growth, and that the actual development is following a cycle that we have at first a period of expansion, then a peak or a boom, and after this boom, it starts some kind of recession followed by a trough, and then again this cycle starts again. So then again expansion and so on. And if we look to the data, then we find that a whole business cycle is roughly 7 to 10 years. And if we look what are our different economic measures are doing within this business cycle, then we can say, Well, of course, in the period of expansion, of course, we have an increase of production. This means also that we need more people and that we need more capital. So an increase of utilization of production capacities. This is more work and capital. If we need more people, then of course we have a decrease of unemployment. This means the type of cyclical unemployment falls. Compare cyclical unemployment. And of course, then income is increasing in our society. And if income is increasing, and in general we have, so to speak, normal goods, what does it mean? Our demand is increasing, and if our demand is increasing, then the firms, the enterprises, they could rise the prices. So this in general means an increase of income, then demand is increasing. Well, and again, our diagram, which we have seen so often, supply and demand, and this increase of income means that demand is shifting outwards, and so we have an increase of prices. Well, if we are going then in this period of a peak or a boom, then we are producing at full capacities, or even we can say for some time we overutilize our production. This means especially overtime. Oops. So increasing extra hours. Well, let's put it in there. Well, and again, extra hours means again increasing wages and also increasing prices. But since we are already producing at full capacity, we cannot increase production anymore. And this means now we have the situation that we have increasing prices and a beginning of a stagnation. And so what is the situation for our enterprises? You have higher costs due to the increase of the wages, but you cannot increase your production anymore. And this means that your profits will start to decrease. So in the end, profits will start to fall. And so the boom ends and we come to the period of the recession where now, due to the high costs, production is now reduced, is falling. We lay off people, so we have an increase of unemployment. This means our income is decreasing and we have declining consumption. And in the bad situation, in the trough, then of course we have the problem in our economy with low level production and high unemployment. And then again, in general, if we have not that large structural problems, then in general we see that the expansion starts again. Well, and within this cycle, we talked a lot about this utilization of capacities, and for this we have developed the so-called concept of potential output. And what is this potential output? This potential output is a hypothetical concept which is really hard to measure. And for this, we think of, yeah, so to speak, normal times. And within these normal times, we can ask ourselves what would be the maximum amount our economy could produce in the long run. So this would be the hypothetical production if we are producing at full capacity. This does not mean that we really produce at full capacity, but it is the potential which we have. And the actual production in our economy could then be higher or lower than this potential output. So in general, we see that the economy is fluctuating around the potential output. So also, therefore, we more or less then can interpret this long-term trend as the growth of potential output. But you really have to be careful that you really keep in mind that we cannot directly observe this number. We can only ask ourselves what would be this number of potential output. And if you go to different institutions, the International Monetary Fund or to the central banks or the government, then you will find for the countries different numbers for this because it is always an estimation. And the next one that we really see this in the data, I took the numbers from IMF, IMF, International Monetary Fund. And then we see that over the last 40 years, for the development of Germany, that relatively actual GDP minus these potential output divided by potential output, we see we have periods with producing overcapacity. So this one, production larger than potential output, and these are the periods production lower than potential output. And then more or less we could fit something like our business cycle within these numbers. Of the German economy. Well, and then I looked also for even longer data, and this is the development of Germany since 1970 with quarterly data. So the growth rate of real GDP, and what we see is that we also see periods where we have growth rates which are below zero, so where our economy were shrinking. And if you look at this data, then especially here and here, roughly here, of course here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 1 to 6 are periods where the economy was shrinking. And now I hope that you can help me which events had we in history from 1 to number 6. So if we start here, and right now we are talking a lot about this period. What happened in the world, or especially in Germany, here in the beginning of the 1970s, so around 1973. Also the internet, you can participate. And this is right now quite prominent in the media. What happened in the beginning of the 1970s? Roughly 1973 it was. Somebody an idea? Yep. Pardon? 73. Hmm? Okay. Yeah, okay, but this is then not a reason, and we are looking for reasons why the economy was shrinking, why we are in a crisis. And this was actually also a global event. Yes, and why did we have high inflation in this time? Which good became more expensive, much more expensive? Well, this was the first oil crisis. Have you talked about this in school? So when the OPEC really said, well, we will not produce any oil for the developed countries anymore. And then, especially, we stopped driving cars on Sundays. It was forbidden. Okay, and then late 70s, 1980 roughly, something similar happened. Well, this was a starting point of all the problems which we have now in the Near East. So this was the second oil crisis. And why this happened? Well, this was also the starting point of the first war between Iraq and Iran. Number three, 1991. This is quite special for Germany. Yep, yeah, yes, and especially for Germany, what happened there in Germany, 91? Yes, the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, and then we had the reunification. So German, and this, of course, was also very costly for our economy. And for 2000, 2001, Well, there we had these large problems at the stock market. This was the burst of the dot-com bubble. And unfortunately, in the aftermath of this, we had also the tragic event of 9/11 in 2001. So, dot-com bubble plus 9/11. Well, and then fifth, about this we have already talked a lot, 2008, 2009. Yep, yes. And this large turmoil here, 2020, 21. Yeah, Corona, of course. Well, and let's say here, roughly seven, we don't know right now, but with the start of the Ukraine war and now more or less our structural problems which we have in Germany, we don't know how we will develop in the future right now. And hopefully it will be not a large crisis, but if you look, for example, at Volkswagen and our core industry, automobile sector, there we have to make a question mark for Germany. So, Ukraine war. So, for this, we all see these events here also, of course, then in our economic data within this business cycle. And in order to be complete, I show you also especially the German data from 1991 until now. And there you also see more or less this is the average growth. And there you also see more or less this business cycle around these long-term trend. And there you see really the actual problem of Germany that right now we are more or less stagnating in our real production in Germany for the last 18 months. For the last 18 months. And well, I would say that we are already in a crisis, but we have to see if there is this upswing, which I think I showed it also to you. This was here. Yeah, that most um, economic institutes see in the near future an upswing, but we don't think that this upswing is coming. So most institutes forecast an upswing, but this is questionable. Okay, then let's make a little cut because now we are more or less done with this mostly descriptive part, and now we want to switch to a new topic. And of course, if we are talking about economics, then of course we also have to talk about money, because money is the main good, the medium of exchange within our economy. Without money, our economy wouldn't work. And for this, we want to talk a little bit in more detail. What is money? And maybe in our times, we don't really think anymore about what is really money and why do we need it. Well, and therefore, we can ask ourselves, well, if I take now here cash money, 5 euros, then this, of course, is also a good. And why is there somebody who gives me something else for these 5 euros? And for this, a good which we can use for money has to have some specific properties. And yeah, well, of course, the main property is, of course, that this good has to be scarce. Because if I would take just grass or something like this, or sand, and it is not scarce, then nobody would exchange something for this. And what we also need as a property of a good we can use for money, we want to exchange this for many, many goods. And therefore, this good has to be divisible so that we can really exchange this good for many other goods, because we need it as a measure for all these relative prices. And then, of course, we all in this room, you in the internet, we have to think about such a good that we value it in quite the same way. So we need the property of equality, so that everybody gives this good the same value. And of course, what else want we to do with such a good? Well, remember the circular flow. There we have our income. We are paid with this good, with money, and then we want to consume one part. So going directly to the supermarket and exchanging this good to some other goods, and another part we want to save. And for this, of course, this good has to be storable, so that this good is there in the future. And since people want to save money in order to spend it in the future. And the last one is, a very practical issue. Well, if I want to exchange this good for some other goods, then I need also the property that I can easily transfer it from one person to another person. And so we need also the property of transferability. Money has to be easily exchanged between people. Well, and if we look at all of these properties, then it is not very surprisingly that in history, in almost all societies in the world, there was one special good which has then, or which was, so to speak, in the beginning of the introduction of money and, for example, gold has all these properties. And this is a fact which we see then if you look at the development of societies in South America, in Asia, in Europe, that everywhere people give this metal, gold, more or less a high value, then it is not very hard. You can easily cut this good. Therefore, it's then, of course, also it is storable. And the divisibility we have, and of course, this main property of scarcity. Well, and of course, all these properties are highly related to the function of money. So the functions, what we want to do with it. Well, and the main thing we want to do with money is, of course, that we use it as a medium of exchange, that it is in general our payment method. And then that is when we distinguish between consumption and saving, we want to store our value. And of course, it is in general a unit of account that we are valuing via money every goods within the same way. And if we look in more detail to the medium of exchange, then we can think of that if we have a good like money, that we then can really reduce transaction costs, and we come to this in a minute. And if we can reduce transaction costs, then it simplifies within our production process the division of labor, and therefore simplifies in general our production process. And for this, you can think of, if you don't have money, let's take three individuals. A, B, C, producing three goods. small a, b, and small c. And then think of your microeconomics course. You have some preferences, and then with the following preferences that B wants good A, C wants good B, and A wants good C. Well, and if we have this production scheme and these preferences here, then of course, if only two individuals meet, there will be no exchange. If only two people meet, there will be no exchange. And when is an exchange possible in real terms? If you don't have money, then all three people has to meet simultaneously at the same location at the same time. So without money, an exchange is only possible if A, B, and C are simultaneously meeting at the same location and the same time. But what can happen with money? With money, we can say that if A and B are meeting and B wants A, that A is transferring his good to B, and now B is paying with money. And if B and C are meeting, then B can give his produced good B to C, and C is paying with money. And the last one, C is now giving his good to A, and A is paying with money. And this possibility then is reducing our transaction costs because we do not need to meet, oops, where we have it here, always simultaneously at the same locations and at the same time. So then money offers the possibility that people do not have to meet at the same location and the same time, and therefore highly simplifies the exchange of goods and services in the economy. So our preferences and our production, when we are meeting all the with two people, they do not have to coincide. If you have this new medium of exchange, which we call money, and especially the store of value then offers us also the possibility that we can have a difference between the time when we are earning our wages, so the difference between income and the time when we are consuming. So this means earning wages and consumption can fall apart. This means we can shift our consumption plans into the future, and saving is possible, which is needed for large investments. There you can also think about the circular flow again. Well, of course, in general, in storing something, we can also think of other possibilities. We can invest in stocks or bonds, but in general, if you think when you really want to directly then in the future consume something, then of course you at first have to sell your stocks, bonds, and with money you have this really high degree of liquidity, so you more or less can instantaneously consume in the future. So with money or with cash, you can instantaneously consume in the future. And the last one, well, about this, we already have talked a lot, is the function of as a unit of account. And this, of course, means that we have standardized our valuation in our economy. And this means we can express all relative prices, oops, the German one, between all our real goods. You can think of that maybe we say that we have to exchange 10 liters of milk for one chair. Then you have a relative price of 1 to 10. And the other one would be maybe then 1,000 liter milk for a computer. Then you have a relative price of 1 to 1,000. And then if you take the chair relative to the computer, you have a ratio of 1 to 100. And if you value all this with the same good for the medium of exchange, then you really can express within this unit all these relative prices. Well, and nothing else have we done when we were calculating, when we have calculated GDP, because money is then, of course, the basis of our national account system. We are valuing our economic performance in money, in euro, because remember the definition of GDP, all goods and services at market prices valued in money. So therefore, money is also something like a general information system within our economy. And there you can think of also of these different price indicators. So if we take GDP, then it was price of consumptions times the quantity of consumption, value of consumption. We had investment and we had government spending and the trade balance Px times x minus Pm times M, trade balance. And all these prices are measured with money. Prices are valued with money. Well, and the last thing we want to talk about today is now we have the properties, we have the function of money, and now we can ask ourselves, well, how much money we want to hold. And therefore, we think of the so-called motives for holding money. Well, and of course, these motives are, of course, directly related to our properties and to our to our functions. That, of course, the main thing we are using, the main thing for which we are using money is for interchanging goods with money, and therefore this we call transaction motive. So maybe if you went into town on Saturday to buy something, then you think of how much money will I take with me since I will buy some trousers, a pullover, or something else. And then you have this transaction motive for taking money with you. The other one is, of course, related to the storability because the future is uncertain. So I will not spend all my money which I have today. And because of this uncertainty, I will also save some money. And this is then the so-called precautionary demand, because in the future there will be, of course, also some unexpected expenditures. And the last one is then, yeah, maybe something a little bit more modern interpretation, that we are also holding money because we are speculating for a future investment. And for this, we can think of, well, that in general, we can think of, should I hold only cash or should I invest it into bonds, because bonds are paying interest? So the question is, shall I hold cash or invest into bonds? And these bonds are paying interest. And now we can think of a situation where we have low interest rates. And then many things in the economy is about the expectations. If we have a low interest rate level, then we can think of that in general, the most people will expect that interest rates rise in the future. But what does this mean? If interest rates are rising, on the other hand, this means that then bond prices will decline. And if I expect that bond prices will decline in the future, then it would be a good choice that I have money in the future when the bond prices are low. So I'm speculating in this situation that I can buy bonds for a lower price in the future. And therefore, then I have the dependence that in general, at low interest rates, I will hold cash money in order to invest in the future for the low prices. And this is then called the so-called speculative motive, or what we can also argue is somehow due to the concept of opportunity costs. Because now we can think of the situation if we have high interest rates and putting your cash money just under your pillow would then mean that you do not get the interest payment when you have invested into bonds. So I'm losing money in a situation when we have high interest rates, putting just my money under my pillow. Because the interest rate, so to speak, of holding money is just 0%. I have the two alternatives: investing into an asset where I obtain, let's say, 3 or 4% per year, compared to an investment in cash money with an interest payment of 0%. And for this, then on the other way around, in a situation with high interest rates, I would then invest into the bonds in order to obtain the interest rate payment. And this is then the so-called speculative motive. And for this, in general, we then can qualitatively derive a so-called money demand function. And this money demand function we will later on then need when we are talking about theoretical models. Because think of the first two motives. In general, we can think of I will do more transactions the richer I am. So people with higher earnings will also do more transactions, so they will need more money. So from this, we would have a positive dependence of the amount of money on income. And also from the precautionary demand, this would also mean if I am richer, then in the future there will be more transactions. So also a positive dependence between money and income. And from the speculative motive, we argued that the lower the interest rates, the more cash money I will hold. One argumentation was that I am expecting that in the future I can invest in lower bond prices, or from opportunity costs at high interest rates. I will not hold a large amount of cash because then I don't get the interest rate payment. So here I have the negative dependence on interest rates. And so in general, then we can say we will have a money demand function, which is dependent on income, positive, and on interest rates, which is negative. Okay, that's it for today. And now we have introduced, our main good in our society, and sometimes we don't think about that much about money, and I think it is a good choice, especially in an introductory course, to think of what is really money. Okay, then thank you very much for today.